Springfield Society for Historic Preservation, we were rallying the troops against the notorious NYU 2031 plan, which they're still trying to do, build these tremendous towers on these open green spaces which we have left, and this is a real tragedy. So we met here and expressed our views about that, and the case is now before the court, so we'll know soon about what's happening there. The other thing that affected me was that the UFD players, we actually did some shows here for the caring community, some holiday shows, and that was a lot of fun. So, without further ado, here's the better half, Warren Wyss.
That's his wife. Well, welcome you very much, and you look like such a friendly crowd. Am I saying cloud? Okay. Speak trippantly on the tongue, right? Okay, I want to say a few words about our lives as friends and collaborators, conspirators perhaps, in this book and other works as well. It started out in the 1980s when it happened to be that Milton and I were colleagues together at Washington Irving High School, 17th Street. And I taught English, and he taught English as well, English and drama. And I was obsessed, and I lost contact with him for a few years. But then it happened to be that as we were leaving the film forum, watching a wonderful program about Paul Robeson, introduced by his son, we happened to see each other. On the way home, he was telling me all about the UFT players, which consisted, and still consists, teachers, school secretaries and counselors, those who are mainly retired but also active, who have a love of the theater and want to perform and write and direct and so on. And so I said, oh, I'd like to look into it. Well, before you know it, I got involved, and we've now done about over 100 productions. And we started writing together. We started writing, and then I critiqued his plays, and then I wrote and he critiqued mine, and we worked together. And we're so seamless as we went on and on. Just two later plays I want to mention. One was a tribute to Charles Dickens, which I call What the Dickens, based on a train trip he had taken in his later life, and interspersed with little scenes from several of his stories. And the second one was a real labor of love, and that was called The Road to Broadway. And that was, there it centered on a particular location, 50 Broadway, which is the site of the UFT. And we did a lot of research looking at a real valid history of who actually lived and worked in this site, all the way back before the Dutch. There even are a lot of old maps showing you houses. There are stories of people who lived there and who worked there. And so we created kind of a science fiction comedy which used that background as people traveled through time, experiencing anachronistically the peoples in various places. Well then, we realized well before then that we were very good together as collaborators. And now Milton would tell us about how we got involved in writing the novel. Okay.
All right. Well, we met, we were working on one of these writing projects. Can you all hear me incidentally? Yeah. Speaking loud enough. And we were in a restaurant near where Warren lives. And out of the blue, someone said, I forget who, let's write a novel, but not let's write a novel, let's write a mystery novel. Now, neither of us had ever written a mystery novel. It was a mystery to us how to do it. So, well, we used to read a lot of mysteries. When I was a kid, I remember reading even Ellery Queen and authors like that. So we hopped over to nearby Barnes & Noble, of course, and got a how-to. And that lasted, I think, a couple hours. We read that. And then it was on-the-job training the rest of the thing. And to start with, of course, we did the baseline things. We investigated, first of all, what voice. We decided we're going to use first person. We're going to have a central character who has a problem and overcomes obstacles. And of course, we're going to use the history of the village, primarily Bleecker Street. I had a special affinity for that street, and we got busy. And how did we work? Well, and long. It took 7 years, mind you. But it was fun because we were in close contact with the UFP players. We were always close to each other, and we had time to work. It wasn't like writing, you write this chapter, I'll write this chapter, we'll meet in the middle, or you write the pages 1 to 6, I'll go on. No, we actually wrote it like doubles tennis players, really close, always working off each other, getting ideas. Of course, we started with some outlines to open up the passion, and then stuff we worked spontaneously, like Stravinsky, the famous quote, how do you write your music, Igor? At the piano. So we wrote it on the spot, and we worked it, reworked it until we had this many drafts, and it was getting closer and closer. And we always kept in mind, the challenge was integrating the mystery with the history. We didn't want this to be a travelogue. You know, here's Father Demo Square, named after Antonio Demo, who served as the pastor of this church for 35 years, or this once house, the Vaudeville house right here, or this was the first all-black Catholic congregation after the Mason-Dixon line was formed. No, not that kind of thing. Really, the story of the central character, who you're going to find out in a minute who he is, we wanted that kind of thing. So we proceeded, trial and error. It was like piecing together a puzzle. You know, we didn't find out what we had to find out until we did it. It was always a sense of discovery, and the journey that we took was like the journey the central character had to take. Who is that central character? You're going to find out right now as Warren reads the opening page or two cuts from the chapter right now. Warren?
Right. Chapter 1, Thursday morning. In memory, everything seems to happen in music. Tim loved that Tennessee Williams quote. I'll never get it out of my mind because that's how my story begins, with a song, a sweet memory all too soon overshadowed by tragic loss. Even though I was late again for class, I felt assured Tim had everything in control when I heard his voice coming through strong. Oh, Canaan, sweet Canaan, I thought I heard him say there were lions in the way, and don't expect to stay much longer here. Shun the danger, run to freedom. I made my way over to the lectern and stood next to Tim, who was getting ready to move into his role. Lean and handsome, his caramel-colored face was darkened now in the room's diminished light, but you could see his eyes blazing with passion. I faced him and flicked my hand for him to continue. He leaped off the small raised stage, and as he crouched near the front row of seats, I started my narration. Who are these lions? What were their dangers? We were a team good enough, I will say modestly, to hold the attention of those savvy students enrolled in our Seeds of Slavery, Fruits of Freedom course. When Tim and I taught the class together at the Green Street Graduate Center, students not only got interested, they got involved. I had encouraged Tim to call his own shots for our last class this school year, but why he chose Frederick Douglass as a topic puzzled me, since we covered it fairly well 2 weeks back. Jeff, Tim said softly, where were you? Ravens trolling the halls. Take it easy, I'm here now. Okay, good, because our man's ready to fly. Tim played a young 20-year-old Frederick Douglass, escaping from Maryland to New York City in 1838. Probably hiding somewhere in his safe house for fugitives in lower Manhattan. Darting over to the corner, Tim, as Douglas, rubbed his hands like he was huddled over a fire, warming his mind with a new thought. Students heard his velvety baritone voice all the way to the back of the classroom, crying out the words that Douglas recalled when he was still a slave on the eastern shore of Maryland, yearning from the deepest place in his soul to be something that the students took for granted. Free, when I was a boy, those slave bosses were breathing down on me, and I used to sneak off and watch all those ships sailing out from the harbor. I was praising, oh Lord, if I could just sail away, or maybe fly with the wings of a dove and be free.
Okay. So, two names, Tim and Jeff. We find out very shortly, and I'm not giving anything away at this point, to say that Tim has got a hold of a book, Lady of the Lake, by Sir Walter Scott, which the main character is Douglas, the romantic epic poem. And we find out very soon that he's going to purchase this, and he asks Jeff to help him and so forth. Well, as you will have it, Tim is murdered. Jeff's younger African-American colleague is murdered. The book is stolen. Now, Tim had been a member of a literary walking tour called Bleecker Street Blues. They went from one end of Bleecker to the other and back. And now, Jeff makes a decision to join that tour to find clues which will enable him to solve the murder and to retrieve that priceless manuscript that I mentioned that Frederick Douglass had signed that to the effect, with this name I got my everlasting freedom. Signed, New Bedford, Massachusetts, 1841. Now you can see why it is so priceless. And Jeff wants to give it to the larger community. And other people are trying to grasp on and make profit from it. That's only part of the obstacles that Jeff has to overcome. The other, his family, his estranged wife, his girlfriend, even the tour president wants him out, and other people and so forth. Tim's sister Rachel and others. But he sticks with that tour, and that tour is very interesting. It starts just a couple blocks from here on Abington Square. It includes such personages, icons, as Tom Paine and Charlie Bird Parker, Abby Hoffman is mentioned, but other scenes are enacted by the tour guides. They actually act out the scenes of this tour, which gives it a special quality. They're all professional actors, but also tour guides. And I found out in the last throes of publishing, Paul, I'm sorry we had to add that Lorraine Hansberry lived at 337 Bleecker and was ready to roll to press, Paul, remember, and I said, let's get Lorraine Hansberry. So let's look at, Warren's going to read another selection where Jeff's first day on this tour called Bleecker Street Blues Tour. And this is his first exposure to actually being on the tour.
Right.
Right?
Right. This is chapter 17, and the first name, Hank Jenkowitz, is the CEO of the little tour group. And he has organized, as a trial run, 3 applicants to see which ones, if one, maybe all of them, would be the actual tour guides. So let's start out. Tuesday morning. Hank Jenkowitz, in a sleek, motorized wheelchair, met me at the Bleecker Street Playground in West Village, the starting point of the tour. It was only 10 a.m., but the sun was already blazing. Even this early, there were signs of life. A few frisbee-tossing stoners, a couple of bongo drummers, some young moms, of course, and older nannies, eyes glued on the toss. Skip a little bit here. We strolled across the street. Pointing to his right, Jenkins remarked that the east-west paths were known as peaceful thoroughfares for native tribes. One such path became Bleecker Street. Doffing his fancy CWC Inc. tour guide hat, Jenkins invoked everyone to breathe in the pure cosmic spirit of the Subcanacan, and in one smooth breath say, peace. Corny, but it seemed to work. Sending a message that this tour would not be an ordinary one. I was game to see what Tim had prepared, alone with his partner Derek, nowhere in sight now. See, Tim had, this was his tour. That's especially important for Jeff, who wants to take the tour to find maybe clues as to who would have committed a crime against him. As we crossed the street, Jenkins said the primitive paths would later become the rest of Bleecker Street, where you might hear at least 8 different languages, just like in the village today, including the diverse dialects of the Muncie Indians and regional speech of newly arrived Africans. He pointed out that some of these Africans had privateers brought to New Amsterdam as slaves, earned their freedom by working the land and building their early wooden houses. Pausing for a gulp of air, Jenkins said, others got jobs as freedmen right from the start of their new lives here. And I mean right here, where you are standing, folks. Hank said we'd be visiting the 10 blocks in Bleecker that were the crucible of social change in America. We would also stop for a typical Bleecker Street nosh, where we would see the gardens that were employed by a very famous singer who in the mid-1960s lived in Bleecker and McDougal Streets. This will be a surprise. Who? One of the tourists called out. Someone who sang at the village gate? Oh, that's at Bleecker Street, right? Well, Hank snapped back. I did know the gate's fabled impresario, Art Lugoff. Matter of fact, I sold encyclopedias with him way back. Special guy. That sign of the gate's last show is still up. We'll pass it by and chat. But sorry, that's not the surprise, folks. Well then, who is it? Another tourist replied. Hang in there, it's just on the road. Hank replied, you'll see in a while. Somebody started to whistle a bit from blowing in the wind. I guess you can guess that. Singer, isn't it?
So that gives you, that's the start of the tour, and then it continues. And there's a scene with Lenny Bruce getting busted at the Underdog, which used to be Cafe Ogogo in 1962. There's a scene with Margaret Sanger. There's a scene with Walt Whitman, of course, and all this time, you know, the scenes, but, you know, it's not only that, it's the fact that his family starts saying to Jeff, stop it already, you're driving us crazy. Now, 2 detectives get into the act, and they're very watchful that Jeff is going to upset the apple cart, and this whole case is going to get blown. Then there's a mysterious construction worker who wants that book. Then there's Tim's stepfather who wants it for himself, and there's a minister who wants it, and then there's a subplot with Rachel. But that's all, you know, it ratchets up the tension. This is really a 3-day, very tense pressure cooker for Jeff. And he's like up and down, almost like the street, up and down whether he should continue. There's great emotional stakes. There's all this family drama, which is sort of reflected in these the stories of the icons themselves. But it's never like really superimposed. You kind of get the sense of that. What he's going through is reflected in what those icons, social activists and artists had to go through in their times, in their special circumstances, but it has more of a universal flavor. So now, towards the end of the novel, and this will not give anything away either because there's cuts within this chapter, let's have the scene with Margaret Sanger rallying the troops of immigrant women.
Okay, like all the reenacted scenes, they take place in the locations of the actual sites. So this takes place right outside of the Planned Parenthood building. Waspish-looking Mindy, playing the courageous Margaret, strolled out toting a packet of leaflets, eager to deposit them in the real mailbox in the corner. They greeted her with joy. Margaret smiled back. "Hello, my friends, hello." Hilda handed Mindy a wooden box to stand on, and she eased into her role. "Ladies, for centuries women have been the helpless victims of excessive childbearing." These words were not blatantly addressed to Reverend Johnson, but I could easily discern how they distressed him. Rachel, when she saw the Reverend reacting strongly to Sanger's words, bowed her head and inched away from him. Mandy continued her singer role with glowing passion. "A disease which brings poverty, unemployment, child labor, prostitution, war, and undesired motherhood." John, as smug Comstock continues, "Why can't you see that these foul rubber objects you are surely recommending here are an affront to common decency, allowing, even encouraging, these women to indulge and wallow in idle pleasure?" "Pleasure?" Mrs. DeLuca cries out. "You ever give a birth? Ascoltare, my husband, he's an anarchista. He says, government go away. But what he give me, I hear in the belly, but that's here to stay." Staunch Mrs. Sophie Feldstein continues. You'll forgive the expression, hamming it up. "He schleps me into my bed. Oi, he pounds me every night. I'll plus. I'll call a cop, or else watch out. I'll take a bite." Comstock had no choice but to arrest Margaret when he dumps the letters in the mailbox, causing all the immigrant ladies to protest mightily. They try to block Comstock completely as they lead Margaret away to jail. And Margaret informs them, "Don't worry, my friends, I'll be back. And for now, you know what you must do."
We want to talk to you some more and answer your questions about the story, the writing process. Some are very interested in how we collaborated, the real story. Or we're open for questions right now. If you do, could you say it loud enough so that we can all hear it? Who's going to start? And we have you starting. Go ahead.
Oh, yes.
We have, incidentally, the artist who did the pictures in the book, some of these recreated in the book, is Maria de Los Angeles. She's a marvelous artist from California, Northern California. And she's now at Yale. And she was studying at Parsons, getting an MF, Master's in Fine Arts. And Parsons burned to the ground, at least
That building,
dorm.
yeah.
With all their artwork.
Yeah.
All her artwork, Maria, and she's so talented, unbeknownst, or maybe they knew the Yale art department, fine arts, gave her a wonderful scholarship. She's here. This is right behind this fence, which is the Pizza Box, no longer. That's another story why we need the Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation to save these landmarks, is where Bob Dylan played his guitar in the 60s, mid-60s, early 60s, on Sullivan Gardens. This one is the bitter end.
Okay,
I'm
let
sorry.
me I'll hold it back.
Okay, and pass these around, actually. This one's the bitter end, which is the title of part one, the famous nightclub, where one of our UFT players' daughter, Bianca, played the bitter end, right, Barbara? Kenny's Castaway, we have a wonderful dramatic scene there where the construction worker and Jeff and Derek, his partner in this ordeal, confront him. And this has just closed this year, Kenny's Castle, which was once a place for assignations for male prostitutes up the stairs. Here you go, pass this around.
This one they all are pretty familiar with. It's still standing today, right?
Picasso Sylvette, the only outdoor sculpture not in the museum. It's a copy. It's on Bleecker and Mercer at Silver Towers. And I use this one testifying against NYU, and we called it Sylvette is weeping of what's happening. Because they were going to build a big tower right in front of those other two buildings, but the architect intervened and it was stopped.
This is it. Maury, do you see what this is, Maury's? Well, the building is still there, but you may not easily recognize it on Bleecker Street because it's now a drugstore. And it was once that famous theater. What was it?
It's where the Meryl Streeps and the Brad Pitts used to congregate in the 1890s, and it figures into the plot.
Where is it?
Did I say?
Well, what's the name of the drugstore?
1920s. Duane Reade.
Duane Reade. If you go into Duane Reade, you can walk up the steps. They have a large series of photographs of Greenwich Village for several decades. Yeah. Bleecker, what's
Bleecker and between the not Westbrook, LaGuardia Place and Westbrook and Mercer. It's right. Remember the Bleecker Street Cinema? Yeah. Remember that, folks? Beautiful. Right next door to there. Now Duane Reade. It figures into the plot heavily. Yes. I don't want to tell how. Okay, who is next? You and then you. Yes.
What was Maury? I've never heard of it. What is it?
Okay, I couldn't hear which.
what was Maury's originally? It was a restaurant.
Maury's was the famous restaurant where all the celebrities of their times, Madame Fisk, the actress, and those would congregate after their theater performances. Maury's. No relation to the Yale.
Right, that's what
No, I don't think so. Maybe.
Well, the 19th century, the 19th
Not
century.
1890s. Why don't you read? It is.
Okay.
All right, yes, I think you had a question now.
How did you discover, investigate the plot of the mystery?
Well, I always think in terms, since I'm an English teacher, we both English teachers, always when you teach literature, you go into plot structure, and so I always think the triangle of the plot, you start out with an inciting incident that starts the plot going, you build up the action until you reach a climax, and then you have a turning point, and then finally, so that was elementary. Then you have a detective story as well, or a mystery story. So generally you have a crime that has to be solved. So that's a given already. And then we have to, of course, determine, we have to find a character. I don't want to give anything away, but it was not that obvious, the one who done it, okay? So we have to integrate that person pretty well.
Let's give an example of, we decided to traditionally have a sidekick.
Yeah.
That's Derek. So when we were like in chapter 8, we had to go all the way back like dominoes backwards and work in and plant, so to speak, foreshadow Derek, how they met on the train after Tim's funeral, and what else, what does Derek do? So we had to build up that relationship, and we had to do this constantly as we discovered it was organic and it built on top of itself. We didn't have a tight outline that had to say, we knew the general direction where we were going. We knew we had to give Jeff a lot of obstacles, or it was just a conversation. We want a confrontation. We want this dramatic. And that owed itself to the fact that Warren and I wrote plays in which they were dramatic, not just narratives. Now we had to make the narrative dramatic. And that we agreed upon, and that's what we struggled for 7 years to do. But it was fun, because we were always learning something. If not about ourselves, about the history, and about writing. So it was fun. It was really fun. I recommend it highly. Why don't you all team up in pairs right now?
They say a good book is in everyone, right? Start writing.
So we have a question right there, and then we'll get to it. Yes?
Oh, I'm curious how much historical research you needed to do, and were there special archives that you accessed?
She said, how much historical research did we have to do?
Let me just start that one. Because I already had started for my doctoral dissertation at NYU. Thank you, NYU, for that. I had done 3 slave narratives. You know, I don't know if you've seen it now, 12 Years as a Slave, Solomon Northup. I took 3 slave narratives, Douglas, Sojourner Truth, and Henry Box Brown, and made plays out of them with commentary. So I did a lot of research on Douglas. I went up to the Schomburg. I had lived half of my life in Schomburg Museum and read everything I knew about Douglas, and I wrote several plays about Frederick Douglass, one of which was the doctoral dissertation, and another play for the UFT Players, which figured Frederick Douglass in it. And then, research. How did we...
Well, first of all, I will say that Milton is an expert on Bleecker Street, and he knows all the historical locations. So that started him on his journey to investigate the place. It's very important, it sets a place. And as we did that research on, let's say, pivotal moments in their lives, because we can't include more than one incident about each of the half a dozen characters, we did research, like newspaper accounts of what really happened, for instance. Sometimes we had to, we were enlightened by a date that was different from the first date, so we had to change things as well. We tried to be very true to historical incidents that happened.
Just picking up on that, we were trying to be true to historical, but we took an apocryphal turn.
Yeah.
We don't know if, for sure, it's in his own narrative. Douglas took the name of, Frederick Bailey took the name of Douglas in 1841 for his own name. But we don't know if he signed it with this name, now I have everlasting freedom or something like that. That we made up. But it's true to the historical essence of its time. I think you had a question.
Yes, I wanted to find out what technique and method y'all used to write the story. Would you like email things back and forth to
Oh,
each
did we?
other?
My wife will testify the ink rolls that we used. Did we write emails back and forth?
All right, and we met every week as well. I mean, there are many restaurants that have our service.
We've been kicked out, literally, some of the best restaurants. It's 2.5 hours, you guys, time to leave. But we did do precisely that. Now, different collaborators work differently, and they have their own methods, but we really, really work very closely together, and styles were very important of writing. For example, I'm a putter-inner, and Warren's a taker-out. And I overwrite everything, because I know, like, with Picasso's famous thing, art is the elimination of the unnecessary. I know that I will cut, but Warren is so focused. He said, Milton, no, a little much, too much here, and a little too much there. So he was able to shave it. And
we were conscious as well that at the very beginning, before we had the publisher, we thought, well, we went to several seminars, for instance, at the Graduate Center, the library. Like once a month, these mystery editors meet to say, if you want to sell your book, this is what to do. So we always heard, oh, you must have the murder happen within the first 3 chapters, or you're not going to interest the reader. And so we kept flipping chapters around.
That took
Like
2
that.
weeks, right? That took 2 weeks, right?
Because really there is a kind of a tried and true way of writing a mystery.
Yeah.
Well, this is a question, perhaps you can't answer it truthfully, but Hammerstein and Rogers worked together, didn't really love each other. Gilbert and Sullivan didn't love each other. Did you end up loving each other, or is it just
There could have been a little inkling, you know, we've been joyfully writing plays together, is this going to break it? It never happened. We were right on track from the beginning, we knew that it would take there was no deadline like Dickens that we had to have it done at the end of the week to submit to the monthly journal. We knew we had time, we were doing other things, we were very involved with the New York People, so we took our time to go through about 10 different, 7 drafts maybe, to the very end. Yeah, anybody else? Say it again.
Are you taking your book to the mysterious bookshop to give a talk?
That would be it.
To be discussed. Meantime, we're doing readings and stuff like that.
Milton and
Yes, Eric.
and Warren, now that you've had a taste of writing novels, after having your experience with plays, what do you stand? Do you want to continue novel writing, or is it back to the theater, or what's the story?
Good question, Eric. Warren and I are now in the process of writing a non-fiction book called The Supernatural World of Shakespeare, which will include some plays and the times of Shakespeare regarding supernatural and reflected. And I'm doing a collection of plays with someone else. You never know, Eric. You never know.
But also, there is so much wonder about even Manhattan alone. And I don't have to cross a bridge to get to find interesting stories. Where I live, you know, I kept thinking, I live in a very fascinating place, Gramercy Park, Madison Square Park, filled with fascinating people and their stories. Why not